All right, welcome everyone. This is Mihai Algiu, somatic psychotherapist and founder of Circle of Being Somatic Shadow Work. This is my friend, Peter Ingle, and a spiritual author of various books on the nature of consciousness, nature of also focused on the fourth way as well, fourth way teaching, as well as the non-duality teaching, as well as the integrating of them. So, as promised, we are going to tackle this topic and this system, this philosophical system of the fourth way teaching. And our intention is to take some of the core principles of the fourth way and present them as clearly as possible, succinctly, and as faithful as possible to how this knowledge came to us. And then we are planning to talk a little bit about it from our experience, from our decades of trying to understand and apply these ideas, and as well as somehow looking at this map from the point of view of other teachings that we both found useful, and they seem to be connected, like the Advaita Vedanta teaching and non-duality, direct path, Zen, Buddhism. Also, I'm coming from a clinical perspective, and I work a lot every day with trauma, psychological patterns, wounding, so-called pain body, and the ensuing limiting patterns and painful ways of holding ourselves back and being inauthentic and not being ourselves and being repressed in our life. So I have an eye on that, but we are focusing on reviving and reigniting these fragments of the fourth way system as they got to us. So that's our intention. Well, I think the way to go, it will be, Peter, as Ouspensky started, when he brought these ideas and shared them publicly in the West, he would say things like that I often say in my groups, that these ideas that we are going to share now, they are not ours. We didn't invent them. We didn't come up with it from our usual, our mental activity or our ego mind or creating ideas and theories. So these ideas of the fourth way system, they come from a higher mind, from a conscious mind, and they are not a product of the usual mind that creates in sleep. Also, what's important is to be open. So as we are presenting these things, you don't need to believe them. You don't need to believe us. You don't need to believe what we say. Gurdjieff, you don't have to believe Gurdjieff or Peter or myself. But what's important is to be open and put aside all the things you know about this. Try to be open and try to let it come inside in a clean, pure way and see if it resonates. And also try to verify these ideas, basically, and you can check for yourself. Yeah, all these ideas you can check for yourself. Yeah. Any idea here that you want to say, Peter, before I go into a little bit the history of the fourth way and how it came to us?
No, not at this point.
All right. So, yeah, the fourth way system, it is an ancient system that it's not very clear what are its origins. Gurdjieff, who brought it to the West. He was saying things that it was present throughout the history of humanity and throughout the history of civilizations. It upgrades itself, updates itself, and goes into civilization whenever conditions are safe for higher knowledge, esoteric knowledge, knowledge about awakening to come to society. So whenever periods of safety and stability are favorable, this teaching comes in. And when a situation becomes unstable and a crisis and wars and unfavorable, dark periods, then the teaching goes down underground, and it's kept more in secret in remote places, and then it comes back up. And there are some, Gurdjieff was saying that he found this teaching in some place in the deep east. It's not exactly sure where, maybe Tibet. And it was called, connected to the Sarmoon Brotherhood. The Sarmoon Brotherhood, supposedly where Gurdjieff found this teaching. And he spent decades there, or 10, 15 years, I'm not sure. And then he was assigned to come to the West, meaning Europe at that time. He was assigned from his elders to bring this teaching to the West. And he was assigned with this task to observe humanity at that time being late 1800s, beginning 1900s, to observe humanity there during the Industrial Revolution, and to present these ideas in a way that people at that time would understand them in the best possible way. And so that's what he did. So this knowledge started to emerge in early 1900s in what is called now Russia, before even the Soviet Union. And that's how it got to us. And he attracted, in his efforts to teach this work, for a few decades, he attracted a number of philosophers, thinkers, scientists, artists, architects of high caliber. And he, some of these people became deeply involved in the Fourth Way and became like a certain tradition, a life tradition. And Uspensky is one of the main disciples, as well as many others. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, Peter Demyanovich Uspensky was already a published author, mathematician, philosopher, a great seeker of truth at that time. He became attracted to Gurdjieff and spent a lot of time with him. And actually, some of the clearest exposition of the Fourth Way system that came to us came via Uspensky. He was able to put in an intellectual way things very clearly, and he systematized the teaching, and as a system, as a method. And he perhaps he was very talented and skilled in using the intellect to grok these ideas. And obviously, it was not just the intellect for Uspensky. He really tried to apply it and make it its own. And also for people who are interested to go to the roots of the system, and which we recommend, is to acquire some of these books. And for somebody new who would like to have a more clear intellectual presentation of the system, I recommend Uspensky's books, In Search of the Miraculous, Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution, and The Fourth Way, which is a collection of maybe 30 years of meetings with Uspensky, which is in the format of question and answers. So apart from that, Gurdjieff, gradually, Gurdjieff and Uspensky, they attracted a lot of other people into the work, and there were groups starting in different locations. During times of crisis, during times of instability, of war, which is very interesting. We are 100 years later, and on the news right now, there is instability, there is war in the Middle East, there's crisis, there's all of that, you know. So, and Gurdjieff said one time that the history of humanity is the history of war. And it seems like he's still very current. So, in order to deal with this adversity, instability, you know, it was the Russian Revolution, the First World War will come, Second World War, so really troubled times. Then Gurdjieff decided to go towards more safer haven where he can teach in a more relaxed way. So he tried to escape towards the Western Europe, and then long story short, he established gradually institute. It's called Institute of a Harmonious Development of Men in outside of Paris. There was a castle, a chateau with grounds where he used as a headquarters for teaching and presenting. At some point, Gurdjieff also, he attracted students in America, and he at some point, I forgot when, he came to America, where there were already groups of fourth way work that were taught by some of his students. At some point, Gurdjieff came, maybe a few times. I apologize for the connoisseurs. Then at some point, there was Uspensky decided to go to London, and somehow there was a little very diplomatic and clean, so to say, separation, or seemingly clean separation between Gurdjieff and Uspensky. And Uspensky started to teach the system, but in London, and he had other students. Like one of the foremost that comes to me would be Ronnie Collin and Maurice Nicole and many others. And at the same time, Gurdjieff continued his work in France, and it's gradually spread in America, spread in Mexico, and there was various lineages and traditions. This work, developed, bubbled. I'm not sure when was the period of great, you know, bubbling of that, but we are now 100 years later, and our intention here is to, I have a sense that this system has kind of is for me and Peter, this system was very instrumental and very useful from the point of view of consciousness evolution. And our intention here is to revive these ideas and to use these ideas to fuel the work, fuel awakening in people resonating with these days, you know. So it's, I feel them, I may be wrong, but these ideas now are like dying embers in some way. And we want to fan them into flame. And now what we are doing now here is just presenting some knowledge, but this is not enough. So we are interested to also work with people and create a certain container conducive for this practical experiential work. It's our intention.
I think another reason, I like your analogy, we're blowing onto the embers, trying to get the fire going again. It's not so much that the fire is not burning right now in places. I see that what happened, this is my perspective, that the fourth way came through Western Europe, as you say, via Gurdjieff, and then from him through Uspensky into the West. And the system, by the way, is, let's say, constructed and intended for a Western mind, meaning a more intellectual mind, scientific mind, people living in, you know, in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, and then the follow-up of that in Europe and America and how that affected life in those countries. And that it's interesting to remember when listening to these ideas, this is not something other than Zen or Buddhism or Tibetan teachings. It is the same, I don't want to say the same idea. What is behind it is the same, but it was couched in Western terminology for the Western mind. So there's no Sanskrit, there's no reference to Indian words, it's a more scientific language. But that should not dissuade you from believing that it has a strong emotional and spiritual backbone. But what happened then is Gurdjieff and Uspensky died in the late 1940s. And then, interestingly, an Eastern teaching wave, a wave of Eastern teachings, swept into Europe and into the United States. And there was a return to Zen, or a new refurbishment of Zen in the West, and of Advaita, Vedanta, and these things. And they brought back in the Sanskrit and the Eastern terminology. And it seemed to almost displace the Fourth Way, which had gained huge popularity and interest in the West. And now suddenly everyone turned to Zen and New Age teachings and non-dualism and all these things. And so what we're doing is, all we're simply doing is blowing on one corner of the fire to show, hey, wait a minute, there's some other embers, they belong to the same fire. And to show how these teachings, all the teachings, overlap. And the Fourth Way, this map, Mihai, you referred to, is such a great way of looking through the map, through the lens of the Fourth Way, to help, again, a Western mind understand more clearly, more succinctly, in greater detail, what these Eastern teachings have always been saying. And another thing in this aspect is, the system is a system of ideas. The Fourth Way is an approach of living through which these ideas are applied. They are distinct, although they connect. But it is also useful to remember, when we are explaining these things, we're explaining a system of ideas, but the manner in which we live them and apply them is what is called the Fourth Way, which I think Mihai is going to go into.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I remember that it's interesting, he was tasked to observe humanity at that time and to present this spiritual pathway towards fulfilling the potentiality of consciousness. Now, I put it like this, it's very technical, yeah, but so it's to wake up, yeah, to wake up, to attain liberation from suffering, yeah. So he was tasked to observe humanity at time, to put it in the right possible way, so they give them more chances to be interested and to apply them. And humanity at that time, there was this movement of industrial revolution, and there was this movement of this science. Now science is important, and religion diminishes in importance in the West at that time. And even so, this was a system to where it's almost like they don't talk about God anymore. I mean, they don't talk explicitly like this. They don't, the word God is, from one angle, not present there. So it is targeting people who are more like strong intellectual center, more mental, who might be triggered by the word God, and who might be put off by the religion. So the system, as you will hear us explain it, is very clinical, not clinical, but let's say technical term, not wet, more like dry, which was actually designed intentionally, not because somehow trying to get God out. No, this is very deeply spiritual, very spirit-based. But it's more like to the word God, and it is divine, and all of that was charged with so much distortion and so much religion that it almost became some put off towards somebody. So it's almost wanting to give it a clean, fresh start for somebody to tackle these higher ideas or higher realities in a way that's not hampered by old religious conditioning. So, Peter, do you have anything you want to add before I move on?
A couple of things that you said prompted some thoughts. One was that religions in their origin always had the what was called the esoteric or the hidden or the inner spiritual meaning. And it may well be that what had happened is over centuries, religion was taken more and more literally. And so God, the concept of God was taken more and more literally. As a man with a beard somewhere out there in heaven, wherever that is, whom you could get attract the grace of, or be blessed by, or be helped by, or whatever, have God resolve your suffering. And that was far removed from the original meaning from which the religion sprang. So the fourth way dispenses, as Mihai, you said, with the word God. And it could be seen that one reason was, as you say, fresh start, take out all that vocabulary, take out all that literal understanding, and re-examine what that means. And we're going to use some new terms, some new language in doing that. And that's what the system is. The system also took out the word ego.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear the word ego mentioned in the fourth way system. And interestingly enough, that had been a word in many of the Eastern teachings. That was a big concept of the ego. And then that term also got introduced into modern psychology in the early part of the 20th century. But the fourth way explains all of that in a very different way. It's the pointing to the same thing, but just this idea that the fourth way language, that it dispenses with these literal concepts that had been entrenched for so long.
Yeah. And later, there are some other concepts that come in. The system deals like as a way to evolve from the point of view of consciousness. Part of that is to study. There's a psychological aspect of the system, helping us understand our psychology. And there's a cosmological aspect of the system to understand the bigger picture. And then there are laws that are governing both the cosmology as well as psychology. And so the system deals with all that. And I did.
And you don't find both of those aspects in many teachings, which is interesting.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And I do appreciate that there are some terms that equivalent to the word God that Gurdjieff brings in, like the absolute.
Yes.
And the
His
endlessness.
holiness.
And the endlessness. His endlessness.
Yes.
Endlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into it. So just the term fourth way that can be like, hey, so what are the other ways? Yeah, that's a legitimate question. So it's
By the way, I want to say that I like how you're doing this. You're leading this because it's not overly intellectual. You are explaining it all very well, but when I do it, I tend to be very intellectual about it. So I think your presentation is a nice, open kind of, you're not imposing structural thinking on the listener, so it's very good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So fourth ways to what? Yeah, we are the fourth ways to consciousness evolution. These are different pathways than what can take up the mountain being some kind of possible potentiality that, as you'll see in the fourth way, says that this is not the actuality, it's a potentiality. The acorn has the potentiality of becoming an oak, but an acorn is not an oak. So Gurdjieff presented this idea that there used to be traditionally four ways for the acorn to attempt to become an oak tree. So the first way is he would call it the way of the fakir. Also, I want to make a note here. So this idea was introduced like late 1800s.
Are you meant to be recording or not?
Yeah, so we are recording. Um, so the first way, oh yeah, so my point here was that these ideas were brought at that point, like 100 years ago. 100 years ago, there's no internet. The 100 years ago, times were different. Also, 200 years ago, think about it. 1800, 1700, 1600. So if somebody was interested to evolve, if somebody was really interested to seek God, to merge with God, to discover the meaning of life, to perfect oneself, I don't know, whatever you put it, in the past, whenever somebody was really, really focused and interested on this, there were several options. Yeah. So these were the options that were presented at that time for somebody interested in evolution. And I am aware that things have changed a little bit these days. However, those still pathways are still available. So first way would be somebody who is primarily, it's called the way of the fakir. Fakir, this Indian term for somebody that, you know, is sleeping on a bed of nails, or like a ODT, some kind of special powers ODT type of person. That's how a Western mind will see that. And the idea was to master the physical body, to master the senses, and to develop an intense discipline and awareness of the inner workings of the body, and to submit the body through arduous tasks and exercises in order to attain a higher level of awareness, higher level of being, higher level of evolution, by mastering the body, mortifying the body, transcending the limits, unlocking potential, you know. So that's the first way. You know, in the past, there used to be, probably now, if we were to go into those remote areas, you may still see people like that. It's probably rare in the West, people holding a certain posture for a long time for spiritual, religious reasons, or they are undergoing like intense hardship or fasting, or for the purposes of this, or yeah. So that is the first way, working with the, also in, as we are going to talk about this, in the fourth way, there is this idea that yes, we have a brain, there's this brain, but actually the brain is governing 4 different minds that are in this human body mind. There's an intellect, there's the intellectual mind, there's the emotional center or the emotional mind. We are going to go into it. Yeah, we're not going to do it now, but then there is the kinetic intelligence, you know, the part of us interested, I mean, where we learn movements and we are moving, as well as spatial things. There's the instinctive center or the instinctive mind with all the senses and the governing of the digestive system, respiratory system, all of that. That's the instinctive mind. And then there's a sexual part. So let's say 5. We have the intellect, emotional, kinetic, moving, instinctive, and sexual. And the brain governs all of this, you know. So the first way, the way of the fakir, is using the portal of the moving instinctive center, the body, the physical self. So the training methods are by going deep there and mastering that. Yeah, that will be the way of the fakir. Now the second way, yeah, the second way is where we are using the emotions, the heart, the emotional center. So we are focusing there primarily. So the pathway of devotion, I would say, devotion towards God, devotion towards a guru or a higher reality or a deity. So where in the second way, there's a cultivating or certain mastery over the emotion and harnessing wild energies of the emotional body to kind of have like a constant focus, love, the divine, dedication, prayer. So that will be the way of the monk. Yeah, second way is the way of the monk. Now, yeah, also a monk, you know, as you'll see, these ways, they build on top of each other. So there's a little bit of a gradation, because the way of the monk, although they are focusing on faith, developing love, attracting the grace of God, or, you know, devotion towards the teacher and the master, they are still practices connected with the body. They are involving the body as well through fasting, through a certain work, but the focus is primarily through the emotional function. That's the second way, the way of the monk. All right, the third way, Gurdjieff presented it as the way of the yogi. And now, it might be a little strange for us now in the West, because when we hear yoga, we are seeing these people doing certain asanas, and we link yoga with the body. And yes, there's definitely a very strong body aspect to yoga. But when Gurdjieff talked the way of the yogi, I believe he refers to these pathways of more like Advaita Vedanta or non-duality, where basically there is a strong intellectual component. So some kind of mastering of the mind, you know, quieting the mind, learning how to have one-pointedness of attention, how to basically explore the various aspect layers of the mind. And in some teaching, this is called the Jnani path. The Jnani path, the way of higher intellect, the way of higher knowledge, and also things like self-inquiry. Such things are connected to the third way. So the idea was, in the third way, the way of the yogi, is that the practitioner will kind of work primarily on the intellectual center to master that, although there might be exercises perhaps and techniques involving the body in order to quiet the mind, but it was primarily using the intellect for that. Yeah, so do you have something to say about the third way, or anything I said so far, Peter, just to make sure?
Yes, thank you. I would add that, just to kind of summarize a little bit, that the way of the fakir is a way of disciplining the body and mastering a discipline of the body, kind of like sharpening a pencil, but the pencil in this case is the body, focusing it in such a way as to bring the person to an understanding of consciousness and what that means relative to the body. And similarly with the monk, it's a way of devotion. It's a way of bringing discipline to the emotions through devotion, prayer, service, all of these things. But again, sharpening the pencil of the emotions, the emotional center, to arrive at the same realization of consciousness. So it's just coming up a different path on the mountain, but reaching the same mountaintop where it breaks into the sky. And the way of the yogi, same thing, bringing discipline to the mind, meditation being a big part of that. And another thing is, all of these three called for isolation. So as they were practiced, as we've been told about, and as you can still see some evidence of, all three required isolating yourself either on a mountaintop in a cave or in a monastery, or in some kind of um, community, a community of people
Yeah.
who are meditating and such. And
Not sure.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, in ashram, give at the same time, all of them required giving up all of external things related to life. So no family, no money, no clothes, just complete concentration for the purpose of disciplining attention and awareness through a given center to reach a realization of what consciousness is.
Mm.
And this, if you understand this in the context of, or what I just said in the context of everything Mihai presented, then it becomes easier to understand what the fourth way means.
Right. Yes. Very good. Thank you. So all of this, they required renunciation, like, job, family, passion. So, and also it required some kind of obedience also. Obedience and giving oneself, surrendering of one's own will, and being, and renouncing one's life and dedicating and going somewhere else. So that's traditionally in the past. I'm talking about hundreds of years and for millennia. These were the traditional ways. So now the fourth way is different and special in several ways. I'm not saying necessarily better, but like different. And so is that it doesn't require renunciation. And this was even like 500 years ago. So the fourth way, it doesn't require for you to give up, not to have a wife, not to be a father, not to have a shop, business. So it actually, the fourth way happens in the midst of your current conditions, actually. And it's important to remain in your current conditions because all the unconscious patterns and all the manifestations of sleep and all the relational things, all of this that we need to study, they are happening all the time in our life. So the fourth way didn't want us to go somewhere else. And from one angle, it is harder, it is harder because now I have all my temptations and all my habits and all the people who trigger me. They are right here. So I'm not going to some special environment. Yeah. So there's some benefits to going to some special environment where you renounce everything. And even us today, we sometimes go to meditation retreats or 1 week retreat or 2 weeks retreat or 1 month retreat, and it's encouraged. I mean, it's a good thing. Is that like all distractions are put aside and you can focus on that and almost like you create a special laboratory, special conditions where one can temporarily attain the deeper self-consciousness, and one can have some certain results by having this artificial protection where the usual stuff are not impacting me. So yeah, so that is helpful. However, the limitation with that, or the disadvantage with that approach, is that you may need to stay there. And if you now leave the ashram and come back and talk to your ex-wife, or go and get a job, and there's no money, and there's the inflation, then all of those spiritual attainments and higher states of being might go out the window, because I don't have the special conditions. So I am not trained how to be conscious and be more awake in the midst of activities. I'm training myself to be conscious and more awake in the midst of quietness. Yeah. So that's the disadvantage. And that's what Gurdjieff was saying, that people may attain higher levels of spiritual development, but they come back to life, then they may lose them because they're not used to it, So the fourth way, basically, we are in the midst of all of this. And also we are in the fourth way, the idea is that one needs to bring awareness and disciplining and optimizing all the centers. So there are exercises related to the physical self and developing some ability to endure hardship and to consciously face some intentional suffering and to overcome tiredness, or developing this kind of, there are bodily based exercises and practices. Then we have emotional based exercises and practices. There are mind based practices and exercises. So in the fourth way, it is necessary and imperative to actually work on all of these 5 functions at the same time while being in life, which is the advantage of that is that now you are training. You are not surfing or in artificial peaceful water. You are surfing or swimming in the middle of the hurricane. It's like real. And then in this way, any gain that has been attained through in the midst of life then can be sustained, can be sustained, maintained. And yeah, I would say I was talking to Peter before this video that I was not sure if this division still applies in modern day, because with the advent of the internet and with books and with the airplane, now it seems less necessary for people interested in evolution to renounce the world. So I think now, fourth way, so the approach of being in the midst of life, this is much more suitable for 21st century. Also, all the people that I know on the path, like Peter and everybody I know, it's kind of in life. I see a lot of evolution happening in the midst of life, yeah? But this being said, I believe there's still this option, the 3 ways, there's still option, they still exist. One can still go to, actually I had some clients who came to me after they went on ashram. So you can go to ashram, you can go to some special cave if you really want to, or they are still available now. It seems like these days are more suitable for this, and especially our viewers very likely are kind of already, they don't want to give up their life and renounce things to go somewhere, so they want to have their life and become more conscious in the midst of their life.
Another thing to add, Mihai, is that the goal of each of the ways, the first way, the second way, the third way, the fakir, the monk, the yogi, is to reach a point where consciousness itself realizes itself. And so it's not as attached to and identified with, it's not experiencing a sense of identity in the centers, the 4 centers. And so a fakir who could, we call it achieve, where consciousness would realize itself through those practices, would suddenly understand itself as consciousness, cognize itself, know itself, realize itself, would no longer be so attached to and so identified with the body. That would immediately give it the same independence, let's say, relative to the emotions and to the mind, the intellect. Similarly, a monk who came through the emotional way of devotion and submission and service and all of that, consciousness would realize itself independent of the emotions and of the emotional center, and at that same time realize it had the same relationship to the body and the mind, and so on. So the 4th way is said to sometimes be a faster way, because instead of trying one of these and going one of those traditional ways would take quite a long time, perhaps, in most cases, from what we read. And in the 4th way, it's a matter of working simultaneously to arrive at this realization, this realization of being, of just being here, of consciousness, that you are not the mind, you're not the body, you're not the emotions. And when I say you, meaning that consciousness is not, we are still the mind and the body and the emotions, but consciousness or awareness begins to realize itself in a different relationship to all of that. And this is why Gurdjieff called it the Institute for the Harmonious Development of Man. He was speaking about harmonious development of all three or all four of the centers simultaneously in such a way that it would feasibly make this arrival at or this realization of higher consciousness more possible sooner and in a more complete way, as you're saying, Mihai. So that in any circumstances, no matter what happened to the body, the mind, the emotions, consciousness would not lose itself, its realization of itself. It would not get drawn back into the lower centers, as they're called.
All right, Peter. So we got to this point where we can actually get into some of the very core potatoes of the fourth way. So one of the very important initial premise that one needs to verify, without which the system doesn't make any sense and is just useless, is this premise that man, us, we, nature develops us up to a certain point. Nature / God or whatever develops us up to a certain point. So it develops the body and it develops the brain, and we become 25. And medically speaking, we are fully formed as a man or as a woman. And we think that we are a complete being, and we think that we are conscious and awake, and we have attained maturity and maximum development. Yeah, just like other creatures here on the earth. You know, there is the puppy becomes like a German Shepherd, and the tiger becomes a tiger, and the little baby whale becomes a full whale. It seems like the whale and the tiger and all the other creatures, they are brought to a full potentiality here by itself. It seems like they are maximum. The dog that I had or the cat that I had, it's the ultimate cat it can be. He has reached his full potential. There's no hesitation, there's no holding back, and it's fully developed. However, man, the human being, is brought to development up to a certain point, and then it stops. And that's the premise of the system. And then basically from that point, one has the option to evolve by oneself. If one is interested, if one is lucky to find out about evolution, one has a choice. So at this point where we reach so-called maturity, from the point of view of the system, this is more like a mechanical development of the body-mind. But from the conscious point of view, from the consciousness point of view, we are far from finished. We are like far from baked. From the point of view of evolution of consciousness and consciousness potentiality, although man thinks that he's awake and fully complete, man actually is asleep from the point of view of potentiality of consciousness. So their options are to remain asleep, remain as we are, and often to become more asleep, actually to devolve throughout the course of our life and become more entrenched in false ideas and more entrenched in mechanical patterns and more closed-minded, closed-hearted, and asleep. That's what happens usually. Or to actually put effort and time and heart and interest, and then embark on this path of evolution from the consciousness point of view. And then now there's a whole pathway. That's what the fourth way is about, outlining this pathway so that man has the right knowledge and tools and assistance to reach the potential of consciousness. So that's the premise. The difficulty is that, yeah, and also it's presented there are like 4 states of consciousness. So from the point of view of consciousness, there are 4 states available to men here on the earth. Once again, remember, don't believe Gurdjieff, don't believe Mihai. Try to be open and check for yourself, yeah? Now, I would like to define consciousness here for a moment, yeah? Because we are talking about there are 4 states of consciousness. And so, what do you mean by that? So consciousness, and it's interesting, this definition is not from the 4th way, but it is helpful. And I mean, it's an important, we are talking all about consciousness, but we don't define consciousness, Peter. So consciousness is that, whatever it is, which is real and which is aware right now. Consciousness is that, whatever it is, which is real and is perceiving these words right now. It's perceiving the world, and it's perceiving the inner world. Consciousness is that which is aware. Yeah. So from this point of view, coming back to the 4th way, I said that consciousness, that which is aware right now, can be in different settings. It can have different settings from the point of view of its awarenessing power, so to say. Or I think, Peter, you have this, I don't want to quote you since you are here, you have sometimes this thing that consciousness can pulsate at different, could you mention that a little bit?
Did I say that? Pulsate?
Oh, all right, never mind. It's like you were saying something, I talked to you that somehow consciousness, which is the same consciousness, it can pulsate at different frequencies. And then
I see. Yes.
More or less conscious.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit like water. There's H2O, but can be ice, can be liquid, can be gas, can be, water.
Well, I thought when you were saying you were using the word settings, what it made me think of is a dimmer switch.
Right.
For light. And so I think maybe what you understood me to have said about pulsating would be like that. Although this is just an analogy, it doesn't explain completely what we're talking about when we talk about 4 different degrees or dimensions or states of consciousness, awareness. But that light, the light of our awareness, our consciousness, can be very dim, almost all the way down to being completely dark. Mm-hmm. And then it can dim up, and it can be sort of dim enough, bright enough so you can kind of see. And then it can get quite turned up even several more degrees. And now you can see everything, let's say, around you. And then it can be turned up way up, like to the level of the brightness of the sun, something like that. Again, just by way of analogy, there are degrees, and that this can go up and it can go down, and it can go up and it can go down. And what we're saying is that in most people, and we'll be more specific about what this means, most people, most of us, when we are born and as we live in the ordinary way, this dimmer switch only goes up a little, comes back down. It does, and then suddenly go, whoo, then it goes up, but it quickly comes back. It never goes up and stays up. And that's what the 4th way is pointing to. It's talking about a consciousness going up to a certain point and staying there. And then maybe at times going up even higher and higher, and then going up to even higher level and staying there. Now you're up. It's always bright. So that's. I think that's what I probably was suggesting.
Mm-hmm. So as Peter said, it's like there are degrees. There are many degrees of awareness of that which is aware. So that's what we are talking about. In the system, we in the 4th way system, we are going to depict 4 ones, just for pedagogical reasons, but know that they are degrees. You will see that they are degrees, especially as you apply these ideas and observe oneself and engage in the work. There are degrees within every state. Yeah, but let's stay on track here, Peter. So there are 4 settings, 4 states of consciousness available to man, the system says, and the man acorn, not the oak tree, so the man regular humanity without doing any particular type of spiritual work or inner work or awakening work, yeah, just left by its own devices, man lives only in the first 2 states. So we are going to go into the first 2. The third and the fourth state of consciousness are coming only as a result of spiritual work or consciousness effort, intentional effort. The third and fourth states of consciousness, reliably, they appear only through conscious effort. They may appear accidentally, in short glimpses, through accidents, great beauty, great pain, or through ingesting a certain substance. But from the point of view of what we're interested here, conscious evolution, those methods are unreliable. So we are interested in changing the dimmer using conscious effort.
And Mihai, if I might add something there, that what we are not interested in, all those things Mihai just mentioned, are instances where something outside of us evokes or prompts or wakes up consciousness, and it turns up the dimmer switch for consciousness. And what the fourth way system, all the ancient teachings are about, is consciousness itself maintaining that switch and turning that switch and understanding that what that means, and not waiting for or relying on something from the outside to do it for you, not waiting for a teacher to do it for you, not waiting for special or ashram or monastery, not waiting for great beauty, where you have to always be surrounding yourself with great beauty in order to be more conscious. No, consciousness managing its own degrees, let's say, is the aim of this whole system.
Yeah, it reminds me of Buddha's attributed words that the self needs to wake itself up by itself.
Beautiful, huh? Yes. Yes, that you could say that's what if somebody said, what's the fourth way system about? It's about that's it.
Yeah, this being said, it is required and necessary to work with others and interact with others. Yeah. So, but let's come back here. So first state of consciousness, yeah, just to outline. Also, as we are going to outline these ideas, you will see that the fourth way has a particular type of language. It's important to learn why, so that now when we refer to that word, we both know what we are talking about, so we can understand each other. Yeah, so it's a particular term. So when we speak, we don't talk about apples and pears, and then we are illusion of understanding each other. Especially now this term, first state, second state of consciousness, third state of consciousness, fourth state of consciousness. These are some fourth way terms that we are going to use from now on. So the first state of consciousness is simple to describe, is that when we go to sleep at night, and we are becoming unconscious, so to say, from one angle, it's just that the consciousness goes to this setting which is necessary for the resting of the body and of the mind, and it's a divine purpose, this sleeping in the night. Yeah, it's really essentially important. And what happens is that in that setting, consciousness is unaware of outside world, and also the centers, the intellect and the emotion center and the moving center, the instinct center, they say that they get disconnected. It's a way somehow for the machine, for the disk to defragment, to break down information, to clean the slate for the next day. So first state is that section of reality from deep sleep, sleeping with dreams. Yeah, so there is a little bit of degree of awareness. We may be aware of dreams, but we may not be aware that we are dreaming. And then we may even remember when we come back, wake up in the morning, we may remember some of those things. Let's say if we are sleeping and there starts to be like a fire, or starts to be water, or starts to be loud noise. If there's certain external stimuli gets to a certain degree of intensity, it jolts us into the second state. So otherwise, we are not quite aware of what's happening. So, in the fourth way, we are not focusing necessarily much on the first state of consciousness, at least at the beginning. We are not trying to alter our sleep. We are not trying to have lucid dreaming. We are not. Anyway, although those are interesting, legitimate exercises, also as one becomes more and more awake, one acquires this self-consciousness that we are going to talk later about. One may be more aware as one is sleeping. The sages talk about this, and one could have experienced some of this too. The body is sleeping, but consciousness is there, aware of the body sleeping. But that's not what we are talking about. We're just a regular person, first state of consciousness, sleeping in the night. That's the first state. Yeah. Anything you want to say on the first state, Peter, or about what I said?
Sure. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. What it makes me think of is it's important to remember when we talk about states of consciousness, we're not talking about the body being in different conditions so much. We're talking about consciousness. Consciousness itself experiences four states. This is the way the fourth way delineates it. And that in this first state, essentially, consciousness itself is unconscious, and it's also unconscious of anything that it's not the things that it could perceive if something were happening. It's not conscious of itself, and it's not conscious of anything else, let's say.
Yeah.
So it's deep rest, deep sleep for the body, but it's also deep rest, you might say, for consciousness.
Yeah.
That's according to the fourth way. Remember the Eastern teachings, they talk about this in a different way. They talk about three states, and then consciousness encompasses all three. But the fourth way has a slightly different way of presenting it, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, so let's stay with this for the purposes of our presentation. And even this first state of consciousness has degrees. And as you said, I guess the clearest way to understand is that consciousness in the first state of consciousness is unaware of itself, unaware of being, and unaware of phenomena. Yeah, so it can go from like anesthesia, yeah?
Yes.
Anesthesia, out, to deep sleep, to sleep with dreams, to kind of tossing and turning with a little bit of becoming a little bit aware of some sounds, so there are degrees of the first state. And so in a higher degree of the first state, consciousness is a little bit more aware of the couch or maybe the sound or some dream, but so that's the first state. The second state, so the second state. Second state is like when it's a clear demarcation. When we wake up in the morning, and it's obvious it's a different state, yeah? So now, basically in a different state, in the second state, consciousness is aware of phenomena, is aware of phenomena of seeing, hearing, can be aware of some parts of the body, can become aware and operates with thoughts. There's thinking happening, there's feeling happening, there's sensing. The centers are now working to get together to some degree, that, oh, I'm hungry, oh, I'm going to go to the kitchen and I'm going to do this. And so it's kind of it's more together.
And Mihai, you mentioned earlier about the centers disconnecting in the first state. And so what happens in the second state is this: two things happen in what we call the second state. One is the centers, the four centers, the emotions, sensations, the intellect of the mind, and thought, all of those, they start to reconnect, and consciousness now starts to become aware of them. It's still not conscious of itself as consciousness, but it is much more conscious of them as well as of the outside world.
Yeah.
And so this becomes our experience, where now we are aware of our outside world, and we are also dimly, or sometimes more clearly, but usually dimly, aware of our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations, our movements.
Yeah. I mean, this looks like also the second state is the normal state. Like the listener here, this is what it's called, like clear consciousness. In everyday life, the second state is called clear consciousness. But from the point of view of the third and fourth state of consciousness, you will see that that's not clear at all. It's very muddy. It's much more clear as compared to a state of sleeping in the night. But in the second state, just to make clear, it's the state where the you and my and everybody and our parents and our doctors and professors and teachers and politicians and generals and everybody, they live their life, going about to work, making money, writing books, performing surgeries, killing each other with bombs or with what's happening now, killing children, torturing women, creating bridges, society as itself, art, sexuality, romance, Valentine's Day, Halloween.
Explaining the fourth way.
Explaining the fourth way can be happening in the second state. So that's the
yes, there's no explaining of the fourth way in the third state. Anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Also, what you're pointing out too, I think, is just as we said, there are degrees of consciousness in the first state, there are also many degrees in the second state.
Yeah.
And that's what our ordinary experience is. Our consciousness is going up and down. It's going up and down in the sense of it's more or less conscious of things.
Yes.
But it's still not conscious as itself, as this awareness that is conscious of the outside world and of the internal world.
Yeah. Now, from the point of view of the fourth way and awakening, this second state of consciousness we talked about, this is called waking sleep. And it's a state far more dangerous than the state when we sleep. Actually, when we sleep in the night, we can hurt ourselves or others or the planet much less than when we are operating in a so-called clear consciousness of the second state. I mean, you can see the fact, basically, most of humanity, I would say 99.9% of humanity lives in the second state. From the point of view of the system, this is like self-forgetfulness. We are in sleep, and the proof is in the pudding, the state of the world. And the state of the world has always been like wars all the time, somewhere, all the time, wars all the time, injustice, hurtful behavior, hurting each other, hurting our mother, the planet, hurting ourselves. That's a demonstration that the second state is not very high state. It's what's happening in the world. It's all this is happening in the second state. The second state is a state where we feel, it's interesting, Peter, we didn't used to talk it like this, but in the second state, we subconsciously feel that we are an autonomous, independent, separate entity, where I am me. I don't know what this me is something connected with me, the body, or me, the mind. I feel separate from other people, separate from the tree, separate from the world, separate from God. I feel separate as an autonomous, independent entity. And in this state, there is lack, sense of lack. Something is missing. Something is not quite right. And there's fear, many fears. A lot of things can go wrong around people. What will they think of me? They will judge me. They won't approve of me. I try to get approval. They won't love me. Fear of me not having money, fear of me not being loved, fear of me dying, fear of me not existing, lack and fear. And that's second state.
And it's interesting because in the second state, this is another thing the fourth way explains. We think we are awake. It feels like, well, what are you talking about? We are awake. And it's true in the sense that now our centers are connected and they're operating and they're reacting to things. We're having our thoughts, our emotions, we're living our life, we're planning, we're worrying, we're afraid, we're all these things. We're awake, yes? But what we're talking about here, what the fourth way teaches, is that consciousness is asleep to the realization that it is the consciousness which is perceiving all of this. And so it has sort of magnetized to, been drawn to this sense of me having thoughts. Around the thoughts, around the emotions, when consciousness attaches to them, it creates this sense of me. That seems legitimate. I am awake. I'm here. I'm doing these things. And so now we're getting to the subtle aspect of what consciousness is and what it would mean to be more conscious. What it would mean for the dimmer switch of consciousness to now go up even higher.
All right, so we talked just before that the second state of consciousness, which from the point of view of the system is a sleep, it's just a spiritual sleep. How in itself it has degrees. And then the lower state, there are less possibilities in terms of awakening. In a higher state, it's getting closer to a higher state. But also the functioning of people in the second state can differ. At the same time, there are some common threads, they are similar. So my point here is that in the state of second state, anything can happen from invading another country. Yeah, I am invading another country because I have a conflict with them and I feel I'm right, and then I'm bombing them, and then I am killing them, people killing each other and raping each other because of some higher righteousness thing. Yeah, torture.
And by the way, that same thing, Mihai, can happen just between two people in the form of an argument.
Yes.
I feel I'm right. I'm now going to invade this other person's opinion and point of view. I'm going to attack them. I'm going to tear down their idea of themselves, and I'm going to prove myself better. I'm going to win this psychological battle of egos. It's exactly the same phenomenon.
Yes. Yeah. The war is in us. Yeah. Now, at the same time, in the second state of consciousness, you can have a very kind, loving surgeon who is cutting cancer out of people's bodies, and before the surgery he prays to Jesus to steady his hand. I had a surgery like this. My surgeon did that. I was like, thanks, man, that's wonderful. So you can do awesome surgery helping a lot of people. You can develop a company to have fresh water in Africa or 7 villages. Yeah, you can head a department of poetry and literature at Oxford. Yeah, all of this happening in the second state. Yeah, so you can see it can be from a serial killer to like a reformer of society in some way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You want to say something, Peter?
Can you pause it?
All right. I like how we are not we are spontaneous here. So okay, so you can see we have different kind of manifestations of this level of consciousness, from atrocities and terrible to noble and creative. Yeah. Okay. Now, at the same time, there's something in common, in something to recognize the second state, to something to recognize this state of sleep. And actually, you can't recognize this state of sleep from the state of sleep. So you need to kind of go a little bit towards the third state and become a little bit more conscious of what's happening to actually even become aware of this state of sleep. So what's happening in the second state is kind of for everybody, whether one is a successful, let's say, surgeon and a loving teacher, or one is a hungry for power war criminal. Yeah, anything in between. It's like this. Basically, in the second state, one is unaware of the sense of being. The sense of being or the sense of presence doesn't, as if it doesn't exist. Yeah, it's like invisible. It's as if it's not there. In the second state, the mind produces constant stream of thoughts. So there's endless chatter of voices and kind of commentary on what's happening, judging what's happening, taking things personally, what's happening, negative voices in the head, harassing us, telling us, hey, what's wrong with you? Look at you. You are such a failure. Come on, you are fat. You are this, you are that. Self-pity voices, self-deprecation voices, constant. The people are there, driving, or in a train or in the car or on the street. People are seemingly there, but actually, if you were to go inside them, they are actually not conscious of what's happening, and there's a constant daydreaming, the past and future worries, desires, what if, rehashing. Yeah, so the awareness is filled with these veils and layers of mental formations, and which are not necessarily pleasant. It's not like imagining that I'm going to go to Bali in February and how wonderful it's going to be, although that's an option, but it's often like they are worrying about what happened or what may happen, churning on this dissatisfaction and this sense of lack. Also, in the second state, there are certain core ways of being, like some unconscious pattern, they are driving my behavior. Basically, like, I'm hiding from people. I don't trust people. Although I'm not thinking about this, it's happening. I'm hiding myself. I'm afraid to be real. I cannot be real. I cannot be honest. I'm also in the second state. I'm making the world and everyone else responsible for my emotions. I have these emotions and it's your fault. I feel like this because of you, because of that. The second state, there is also full of this worrying about other people think about me, and how I should present myself in a way that people like me and I gain their approval, or all this dance of trying to avoid being judged, rejected, and all the dance to get approval and being liked and get love in order to feel safe. All of this constant, stressful machinations, so to say. In this state, the state of consciousness, we talk about things we don't know as if we know all the time. We talk about other people. There's this gossip, there's judgment, there's a sense of inflated superiority, there's this sense of myself as being better, or there's a sense of myself feeling like piece of shit and not good enough. So these are all, no matter one is a war criminal or one is a successful poet, these are all happening in the second state. Also,
And also
go ahead, Peter.
if I may, thank you. I was going to say that, again, from the point of view of being asleep, that it is consciousness which is asleep while all of this is happening, that the tendency is for consciousness is not aware of itself. It is aware of what it is conscious of. And the more it attaches to whatever it is aware of, like a thought, an idea, a principle, justification, a reason, an imagining, be it a positive or a negative imagining, the more consciousness attaches to what it is conscious of, the more extreme is the reaction and the behavior of the four centers. So you become very attached to a negative thought, and then you really just stick to that, and then it becomes full blown, and it connects over to a really extreme emotion. Oh, mom, now your back hurts. It starts to spread as a more extreme form of reactions, a more frenetic. Extreme is a good word. And now you get more and more, you grow more and more asleep, consciousness. Ironically, the more consciousness falls asleep in our thoughts and emotions and behavior and actions and decisions, the more we feel, the more energetic we feel. Like I'm really angry, or I'm really happy, or I'm really right, or I'm really worse than everybody else. It's very extreme. So just that consciousness can go very, very more asleep. When you're not, consciousness is not so asleep, it's okay how you are. It's okay what other people think. Why would we want to have conflict? Why do I need to? There's less attachment, or what the system calls less identification with our body, our mind, our four centers, the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are people who don't have a lot of, let's call them problems. They have enough money, they have good health, they have people around them who love them or like them or respect them, or who at least feed their imaginary picture of themselves. And it can, you see this in some wealthy societies. People seem like they're pretty happy. But as Mihai is saying, they're not more conscious. Or it's not that they are not more conscious. Consciousness is not more awake or aware in them. It just happens that their circumstances as such are less disruptive for the time being. Anything can change. The old saying about the master, something happens and he says, well, it seems so. Something good happens, and then something bad happens and he says, well, it seems so. And then that turns into something good and he's, well, it seems so. So things can change for anyone.
Yeah.
But it is, again, I'm just trying to reiterate that another way to say it is, the more consciousness is asleep in the second state, the more we experience ourselves as a person, an individual with problems or with conflicts in ourselves or with others, the more that's who we think we are.
Yeah.
It seems very real.
I am me inside this head, or I am me inside this chest. It's a separate me that has problems and is missing happiness. In the second state, happiness is pursued through objects. I'm going to get money, get this partner, get this car, get this success, or get this substance in. Happiness is more like missing, and actually it's achieved temporarily, connected to something, and that when it fades away, or so it's temporary, it's unstable. And actually, in the second state, all of these centers, like the intellect, the emotional center, the sexual, the instinctive center, they are firing impulses all the time, firing thoughts, emotions, desires, senses. They are firing them all the time. And then in the second state, consciousness, and they are all contradictory, and they come from different parts of the world. They don't know each other. They fight each other, different parts. In the second state, we are not aware of this inner contradictory operation and different parts of myself. So we are unaware of sub-identities, unaware of what's underneath the iceberg, and consciousness is identified with each thought. In the fourth way, they call this the many eyes. We are going to talk about another time. Each impulse becomes I want this. I am not good enough. I am angry. I am better. This I is just a fragment, takes over the whole I. And then it goes away. So I think we can, the whole the fourth way is, at least as it came to the West, is targeting very much how to change that situation and how to shift from the second state towards more higher states of wakefulness. The main obstacle is that we think we already are conscious. So that's what's interesting. So it's hard to have, Ouspensky was saying, like, or Gurdjieff, it's hard to have someone make a lot of effort to become conscious if they think they're already conscious. Yeah, they are not going to buy into that. So from one angle, it requires some kind of higher level of self-awareness to realize we are asleep. And actually realizing we are asleep, it's a good place to be because now there are options.
And to me, this is a valuable distinction about the fourth way, or the system, the fourth way system, compared to what's called the direct path or some other teachings. That the fourth way is very explains in a very comprehensive and explicit way, in great detail, what it means that we are not conscious. What does that mean? I'm not. How am I asleep? There are so many facets of that. There's so many forms it can take. And the fourth way really tries to delineate and explicate all of them. And whereas the other teachings, they kind of just point you right to consciousness. Just listen, don't worry about us. Just realize you are that which is aware and just hold to that. And that's valuable, except that it's so easy for consciousness to fall asleep again, to get pulled back down by all these things. So the fourth way teaches all of these things, all of these little pitfalls, holes where consciousness keeps falling into in different ways. So that, and this goes back to the idea of the three centers, harmonious, working on all four centers at the same time, working on consciousness relative to all the centers simultaneously. Now you start getting the point where none of these centers can trick, let's call it trick consciousness, or draw consciousness away from itself, its own consciousness. And so the fourth way can seem overly detailed, maybe too dense, too structured, but in fact, it is I feel it is the most complete explanation of what it means that we are asleep, for the purpose of trying to have us understand what it would mean to be more awake.
Yeah. Well, I think for the sake of the presentation, we can go towards the third state, and we can riff on this at a later time. I'd like to move it along with the third state. I guess a definition of the third state in the fourth way system. Would you like to take a stab at it, Peter, or talk about the third state, or like do it?
Well, a simple one I like actually came from Ouspensky. It is the realization of being here right now in this place at this moment. But that's just the very beginning of the third state. The third state also has degrees, but it would be the sense, not the sense, it is a realization of being here. It's not a thought, not an emotion, not a sensation. It is simply the realization, as he said, I am in this place at this moment. And unfortunately, that quickly becomes a thought. I am now here. But it's what precedes that thought. It is simply the realization of being here now. I think that's a fair there are many definitions. The other thing, it goes back to understanding it in the context of the other states. First state, consciousness is unconscious of itself and unconscious of phenomenon. Second state, consciousness is still not conscious of itself, but it's now conscious of phenomena. Third state, consciousness is now aware of phenomena and aware of itself as the consciousness of phenomena. Yes. This is obviously, and that's why Ouspensky said, I in this place, in this moment. Now consciousness is suddenly aware of being here while the body's here, while the mind is here, while the world is here. Do you have a, I know you had your definition earlier, it's that which is aware right now, hearing. And
well,
is that what you were going to say, or did you have something else?
That consciousness is the definition of consciousness, I put it before, that which is aware right now, that which is perceiving, that which perceives. But the third state is that which perceives is very aware of phenomena in the present moment. That which perceives is more aware of phenomena, especially more crisply aware of thoughts as they come, and of feelings and how they are connected with beliefs and sensations in the body. And also in the third state of consciousness, there's less mind activity usually. So one is more here, as Ouspensky said, more like as a cat, but conscious of being conscious. So in the third state, the awareness is aware of phenomena and is aware of being at the same time. Right? So
yes, and I like what you said, that, and I hadn't thought about it, I hadn't formulated it this way before until you just said it, Mihai, and that is, the more that consciousness is conscious of being conscious. We're calling it, the fourth way calls it consciousness. The many teachings nowadays call it awareness. But the more consciousness is conscious of being conscious, the more vividly it is consciousness of other things.
Yeah.
So, and this is a way to kind of taste in yourself when you realize you're starting to experience, consciousness is starting to come into focus more as the third state of consciousness. Suddenly you start to notice things more. Just a pencil lying on a table, or a shadow cast by a flower, or the light on someone's cheek. Suddenly you are more vividly conscious of those things. What happens to most people, or many people, who, if you don't know what we're talking about, yes, you do become more conscious. You are actually, consciousness is in the third state at a low level, but it doesn't know itself as that which is suddenly now more awake. And what the fourth way is trying to teach is, how do we learn this flavor? How does this consciousness come to recognize itself and understand that all of this work is about that? It's really about this consciousness. It's not about us becoming better, not having so many negative thoughts, being a better person, being more calm. It's not about any of that. In the end, it's about consciousness waking up to itself, and then waking up to everything else simultaneously.
So, okay, so let's get back more like the tenets of the system. I guess the third state is self-remembering. So the third state of consciousness is self-remembering. The third state of consciousness is presence, being aware of being and aware of what's in the present. And this doesn't happen. This happens only, or this state can be experienced for a longer duration and more reliably only by making conscious effort in a particular way, in a sustained way, because the second state is our default state and is pervasive. And so without effort, we are falling back to the default state of being asleep, the second state. So for a long time, to rise in, to swim underneath the ocean, to swim up to the surface of the ocean, to see, not to be underwater, to be on top of the water. So for a long time, that will take some type of conscious effort and intention and a lot of reminders for a long time. At some point, the situation changes and there can be some momentum of self-consciousness, but at the beginning, it needs a lot of reminders and a lot of conscious effort. Yeah. Now, this third state appears in life. It appears in all of us, basically, even if we are not interested in awakening or evolution. So we have like accidental flashes that it usually happens in childhood. When we are in childhood, whenever we have a vivid memory, like we remember something from childhood, and it could be like we were in a certain place that was unusual, or something really bad happened, or something really beautiful happened, or something scary happened, and then we have this memory like so an element of the third state or the higher state is it creates memory, is more vivid. So whatever vivid memories we have from childhood, is it happened that for some mysterious accidental reason, the consciousness was more vibrating, so it got vivid memories of that. As I said, it can happen in moments of great beauty, can happens like, you're driving and suddenly there is like an accident, then you see a car coming, rolling in front of you, over you see the whole perception will change and there's like no thoughts and there's a whole other state. Yeah. So that can happen accidentally, but from the point of view of conscious evolution, those are irrelevant. We can't rely on accident. So, but we are talking about it so that you have a sense that you experience that.
And also those moments, Mihai, as you say, they create vivid memory. But what happens in those moments that the memory is primarily about the phenomena or the experience that consciousness suddenly became aware of.
Yeah.
But it's so vivid, it leaves a trace in what's called our memory.
Yeah.
The value of thinking about those kinds of moments in our lives to get a better understanding of what we're talking about as the third state of consciousness and what it means to be more awake is that in those moments, if you reflect upon them, you realize that which can be aware of itself right here, right now, is exactly what was a little more awake at the time that that thing happened that created that memory. It's the same. It hasn't changed. For example, over age, it doesn't change as we grow. You can remember something in childhood, and then if you realize, wait a minute, it's because I was here inside, aware, but I didn't realize I was here. All of my focus went on to the thing itself. And what we're doing now is consciousness, you could say, is trying to learn how to bring its own attention back to itself, its own awareness and focus back into itself as itself. So it's interesting to visit memories and distinguish between the thing that you remember and that which was aware of what was happening when that thing happened.
So we are aware that this is like dense and intellectual. Now, this being said, all of this, the dense intellectual knowledge is very targeted towards some practical application. What we are doing here is more like laying out some foundation of knowledge and its context. That is not enough. That need to be applied. So we can do this in a group or with someone. So we are going to offer a context for that. Now we are staying at this level of providing a framework, knowledge. Also, if you're watching this and you have questions, I suggest you write them down. Write them down and email them to me. I'll put my email here below. I can share them with Peter. Also, you can also ask your questions in the comments, and we can tackle them. All right, so coming back to, there's an important idea here that we touched upon it, but I like to make it conscious. In the system, they say that the fourth way system is that in the second state of consciousness, the state of waking sleep, that we believe that we are awake. It's a little bit like with the allegory of the cave, Plato, allegory of the cave, or the more modern allegory of the cave is the Matrix movie, where Neo is in a jar somewhere, but he's not aware that he's in the jar. And he imagines that he is like a computer programmer in Melbourne, but actually he's not. He's dreaming to be a computer programmer in Melbourne. Actually, he is in a jar somewhere being sucked by or energy and electricity by the machines. So anyway, in the second state, we have certain illusions about ourselves. We believe we have certain qualities. We attribute these qualities to us, but actually that's an illusion. And actually, the fact that we imagine we have these qualities are an obstacle to getting those qualities. So in the second state, there's the illusion of consciousness, illusion of I'm awake. Yeah. But as you will see, especially if you start to work with attention and, work in a certain way, you will see that as compared to third and fourth states of consciousness, the second state is really sleeping and it's dangerous and it's suffering in it. And there's a way out. So coincides with Buddha. There is suffering, there's sleep. There's a way out of suffering, out of sleep. Yeah. So illusion of being awake. Yeah. Yes, you are more awake than when we are snoring, but it's just a joke. Another illusion is illusion of will. Illusion of will. In the second state, we think we can do. I can make things happen. I can do it. But even with a little bit of wisdom, looking back at our life, you can see, I can see that I didn't decide any of those things. There was this combination of factors and conditions. The whole universe contributed to what happened in my life. And I didn't do anything. Things were happening, basically are happening. And even the decisions that I did, to get married and to go in another country, that came as a thought. So that decision arose as a thought, and the thought, they happen to us. We are not deciding our thought. There's no thinker deciding the thought. There's no little kind of green thinker that's going to decide who's going to think next. Everything, the thoughts, the emotions, they happen to us, just like the weather is happening to us. And in the second state, we don't see that. We think I'm the boss here. I'm the director of my life. And when in fact, every 3 seconds, some other thought, other feeling, other parts of myself comes. There's like a Titanic with the captain being asleep and the sub-captain being drunk. And then everybody's doing whatever they want. So the illusion of will. Another
instead of many eyes.
right. So thank you, Peter. Yeah, another illusion of the state of second state of waking sleep is that we have the belief or the felt sense that we are one. I am one. But operationally, what's happening is that consciousness is dormant. The one that is aware is unaware of itself. And then there are all of these centers, different contradictory impulses, firing, thoughts, feelings, desires, wishes, plans that come from different parts of our being that go against each other. They don't know each other and they fight against each other. And actually, there is no actual unity. The unity is at the level of that which is aware. But in the second state, that which is aware is asleep. So there is no unity. Also in the second state, there is this, we are looking out there. Basically, the second state of consciousness is like a filter. So we are now, there's this illusion of separation, basically. And I must say that this is not one of the classical illusions from the second state. So I want to say that. At the same time, it's so obvious that I am going to say it. So in the second state, there's the illusion of being separate. Everybody believes that we are separate from everybody else and we are independent bodies here doing our own thing. Is the illusion of the wave that is in the middle of the ocean made of water, imagining that, oh man, I'm alone, I'm not good enough, I'm doing my own thing, I'm separate from the ocean. Yeah. Or a cell in my body, a cell in my lung is feeling and believing that is separate, but this is just an illusion. Actually, it's part of this whole body. So the same way, and that's why we are harming each other and we are harming the earth because we believe it's separate. So,
Mihai, something there also is that this is interesting. This relates to time and space and dimensions and form and all that. But the fact is, our bodies are separate. On one level, we are separate physical objects, like two different trees or two different rocks. So our bodies are separate from other bodies. Consciousness is not based on anything about separateness. Consciousness is allness, wholeness, oneness. But what happens is when consciousness is asleep, it means it's now attached to, identified with my body, this body. So now there's this experience of being separate as an identity. Yes, physically, I am separate from Mihai. Our bodies are not the same body, but it's this sense of I that now starts to permeate and be appropriated by the body and by the mind. And now we feel like I am separate. I must protect myself. I must present myself a certain way. I must have opinions. I must fight. I must whatever. And so this separateness begins to develop. And we call this unity. We think I am a unified person. And the fourth way helps us see that a couple of things. One, all these centers, suddenly I am hungry. I am happy. I belong to a certain political party. I am of a certain religion. I. All of these I's, they are not the same in the same time. And similarly, we are actually not the same person. Our idea of ourselves, that is. My idea of myself is one way when I'm having a casual dinner just with my wife. My idea of myself will change if suddenly we go to a cocktail party or into a bar. Or when I'm at work, the way I interact with some coworkers is different perhaps than how I imagine myself and feel myself in relation to the boss. And so in these different scenarios, we kind of morph into a slightly different personality, meaning persona, a different mask sense of me. Now I'm presenting myself to the world differently because I feel myself separate from the world as an identity. And I assume it's all one, that I'm unified. But when we start to look closely, we see that we are different in different circumstances. And we see that we have different moods, different thoughts, different sensations. They're not always the same, even though they appropriate our sense of me. And it's actually conscious. This is not consciousness. This is consciousness asleep in the four centers and in these masks, these personas, as a feeling of I.
Yeah. And as we are, we start in the fourth way, we start work where we are at in the second state, trying to observe, become more awake in the second state and observe the second state. So as we are going to go towards experiential practical work, we are going to study this and observe. We are going to observe this illusion in ourselves. And yeah, it's interesting, Peter, you said this, that the body is separate, and from one angle it is. But as we do conscious work, conscious labor and intentional suffering, as Gurdjieff would say, as we engage in years of conscious labor and intentional suffering, and we are having more experience of the third state of consciousness, fourth state, the consciousness is like more awake to itself and what's happening. This sense of separation, actually, Peter, I look at it, is like even the body, it's still an illusion. It's still an illusion of separation, because like, I have putting food in this body all my life. How many tons of food, and this coming in and it coming out. So where does this food coming out? So there's this food, this body is made of this material coming and going. And then there's air coming and going. And then as an independent body, that doesn't exist. It's an illusion as an independent body. Right now, the whole universe is keeping this body alive. There are laws of pumping the oxygen and all of that. And so, but at least, one of my teachers used to say this, I like that, Francis Lucille. It's like, there are different flowers. Imagine a tree with flowers and a big tree with flowers and with leaves. So Peter and Mihai, there are two different flowers on the tree of life, but it's the same tree. I mean, it's all the same tree, that which pulsates, Mihai and Peter and everything that keeps it alive is just one tree. It's just one treeing. There's a treeing. Yeah, so even that, the bodies are, yes, somehow separate from each other, but no. And so in the third state...
You sure we came off the same tree, Mihai?
What?
Are you sure we came off the same tree?
Yes. It's this divine creative...
Well, I say that,
diversity.
I was joking, of course, but now what you say is, now we're touching on the fourth state of consciousness, this understanding you're explaining now, because
right,
where first state is consciousness is not conscious of itself, and it's not conscious of phenomena. Mm-hmm. Now, second state consciousness is still not conscious of itself fully, maybe dimly, but now it's conscious of phenomena. Third state, consciousness is now conscious of itself as this awareness and conscious of phenomena. Mm-hmm. Fourth state, you could say, is consciousness is conscious of itself as everything. And it is conscious of the realization that everything is consciousness. So now phenomena and consciousness are one. They are the same. And that's when our bodies are no longer distinct. Nothing's distinct. Everything is a form of consciousness manifesting in creation in different levels of density, vibration, pulsation, appearance. It's all, but you tell that to someone in the second state of consciousness who hasn't had that experience as a fact, and it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like a stretch of the imagination. It sounds preposterous, and so sometimes that's why I think it's not talked about, because it doesn't do any good for someone who's on the 12th floor of a building to call down to the people on the street and say, you should see what the view looks like from up here. And if you want, I'll hold a satsang and I'll tell you about how the view looks from up here. But the people on the street, they say, where's the elevator? Where are the stairs? How can I get up? I want to have that view. Many people are content with just listening to the wonderful description of the view by someone else, whether it's true or not. So, but this fourth, that's a different, and as I think you pointed out earlier, what the fourth way teaches is you can't, it is possible to go directly from the second state to the fourth state. This is unusual, and it's even more unusual to stay there, for consciousness to stay there. But just as you can have glimpses of the third state from within the second state, consciousness can dim, the dimmer switch can go up. It can also dim all the way up to super bright. But the chances of that happening are greater if consciousness is already in the third state. And that's another thing the fourth way says is, you can't go from the ground to the rooftop. You've got to go to the middle floor there first, kind of orient yourself and try to understand what it means that the view is changing, and then proceed. And in this comes back to the fourth way as opposed to the other three ways. To understand the third and the fourth states of consciousness as facts for oneself is different than kind of experiencing it but not really know what was experienced. And so the fourth way is very helpful in that regard. It's kind of like a scaffolding around the whole building. It goes all the way up to the fourth state to support consciousness, not so the mind can get there. It's a mental, the scaffolding is just around this, and actually what the scaffolding is around is an empty building. It doesn't really exist. It's just consciousness. But the mind, then the fourth way is the mind building a scaffolding around this nothingness of consciousness in order to help consciousness realize itself inside the scaffolding. And I feel also that actually that's what a human being is. A human being is an artificial container, like a scaffolding. And it's what's so distinct about it in perhaps the universe, that's a bold statement, is that it is a particular kind of container, unlike a cat or a rock or a planet, wherein consciousness can come to a realization of itself as consciousness inside the human form. This goes back to Gurdjieff, we're not complete yet. For a human being to be complete is for this awareness, this seed of consciousness, this potential of consciousness in the human being to realize itself, recognize itself. And then everything looks different.
Wow. All right. Yes. Yeah, so we moved a little bit towards the fourth state. And yeah, before we go into nuances and our own rethink about it, yeah, I'd like to go back to the actual theory. And I remember that I was pretty disappointed and shocked when I was young. And basically, there's not much information on the fourth state. They were saying something along the lines, Gurdjieff was saying that the fourth state is that consciousness is consciousness of oneself, as well as of all that is, and the laws of the universe as they are. And that's it. And then you're like, what? So now what I appreciate, the level of practicality, and Peter talked about this just now. Gurdjieff realized that there's no point to take somebody in the second state who is asleep and unconscious and harassed by all these demons, self-created, and talk about this state which is way too far. So it's impractical. It'll only fill their head with dreamings and imaginings. So they were like, hey, let's not go there. What's practical for someone at the beginning to study the basement of the third state, of the second state, of the state of sleep, and try to move to the edges of the second state and become more awake and what's practical is to access the third state, self-consciousness, more reliably, more frequently, longer. So the way to go to the fourth state, the way to go to the fourth floor of the house, we need to go to the third floor. We're going, as Peter said, to the fourth floor, doesn't work. And even if it works sometimes for unusual experience, it's not sustainable. Now, the fourth state, what is interesting is that what great religions or teachings, when they speak about enlightenment, about liberate, full enlightenment, and reaching nirvana, and all of this, they talk about the fourth state. So that's very interesting. A lot of spiritual paths, a lot of methods, they are offering maps to the seeker to the fourth state. However, you can't get there before you get to the third state. So that's very important aspect of the fourth way map. However, let's talk about the fourth state. So what seems to be happening is that as one jumpstart this, the subject, the subject is aware of objects, and then the subject becomes aware of itself. That which is aware of being and of the phenomena. As this is getting more frequently stronger, it deepens. There's a maturing, it seems. And then with the right teaching and the right pointers, then it is more practical to explore the fourth state. And the quality of the fourth state, or where you hear about the fourth state, or it's all about oneness. So one is a sense of oneness, in a sense of fulfillment, absolute fulfillment. Nothing is missing, everything is complete. There's all is well, nothing is missing. Although people are killing each other, still all is well. And
because the oneness and all that you're explaining is true for consciousness.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for the body and the mind while we're still alive.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the human being is going to be completely blissfully happy forever and have no suffering and have a remedy for all the world's ills. It is consciousness that is in what we call the fourth state, or is existing as the fourth state.
Yeah.
It's not, and this of course has a huge effect on the person, on the mind and on the body. But the bliss of enlightenment, as it might be called, is an attempt to describe a characteristic of consciousness experiencing itself and the way it perceives reality from that perspective.
Yeah, so let's say sages or books coming from that level of understanding, they are talking about that I am nothing, I am everything. Consciousness is both. Consciousness is everything. Wherever your eyes fall, there is the face of God. So if one can truly experientially feel that and see that, not as a theory, that everything my eyes fall, it's me and it's God, and it feels like that, then you probably don't need to watch these videos we are doing here.
Well, but what that's, yes, that's right. What happens, however, is that you see the mind can take this idea, this concept of the fourth state, and try to think in terms of the fourth state, and that's very helpful. But it's just thinking in those terms. It's creating a psychological environment in which it might be possible for consciousness to come into focus more vividly as itself, as consciousness. And you can do the same with the emotions. It's actually, this is kind of what the three ways are. It's the body trying to physical its way to the fourth state. The yogi is trying to think, it's the mind trying to think itself to the fourth state. A monk is, through prayer and whatnot, is prayering yourself to the fourth state. And that's what's so beautiful about the fourth way, is you see what's going on here. It's not about thinking about consciousness. It's not about wanting to feel more. Let's be more conscious, everybody. Or trying to do something physical with my energy, my physical energy, my kinetic energy, as you called it earlier. All of that's valuable up to a point, but none of the body, the mind, the intellectual center, the emotional center, the other centers cannot comprehend what we're really talking about here. They don't have the capacity. It's well beyond their capacity. They are not consciousness. Consciousness infiltrates them, permeates them, enlivens them. But without consciousness doing all those things, they are nothing. But consciousness is what can rise. It's sort of like light beams on the earth, becoming aware of themselves as light beams, and then tracing themselves all the way back to the sun, and realizing themselves as the sun. They're a manifestation of the sun. And actually, that's true. Each of the lower states is actually a manifestation, a lower manifestation of a higher state. But that's getting into another topic.
Yeah.
But what I would add is this. Here's what's interesting. People say, well, how can I be in the third state? How can I be in the fourth state? And what the fourth way says is, don't worry about that. Instead, try this. Observe yourself as much as you can in the second state and see what you see. Notice that you become more identified, more attached. You're having this worries. You're feeling like people don't like me. I'm worried about how I have to present my... Try observing all these things. By virtue of observing ourselves in the second state, which sounds ironic, awareness starts to realize itself as that which is doing all this observing. Mm-hmm. So by observing yourself more consciously in the second state, you're indirectly, I don't want to say developing, but the third state, it pops out of the second state as a realization of itself, as consciousness observing. The same is true with the fourth and third state. So what we're talking about being in the third state, how do we know we're in the third state if we're in the third state? There's even another dimension of consciousness that knows it's in the third state, or knows itself as the third state. So the more you're in the third state, the more you're also trying to observe the realization that you're in the third state. And from that, the fourth state pops out as yet a higher dimension, another sphere around. It's like, here's fourth state sphere, inside is third state, inside is second state, inside is fourth. They are all consciousness, yes, in varying degrees of awareness as consciousness.
So, after I left the fourth way community and I discovered non-duality, Advaita Vedanta, direct path, high teachings. So basically I started to get information about the fourth state, and everybody is trying to reach unity consciousness, which I think is the fourth state, but skipping self-consciousness, so that is challenging. So that's what I noticed. People are unaware of themselves, unaware of their patterns. There's a lot of patterns of unconsciousness and a lot of second state activity happening, driving my life and my relationships. And then I'm going to a satsang to try to realize that consciousness is all. It's not going to go so well, or even if it goes just through a little bit of, it's not going to be lasting. So what I appreciate about the fourth way is that, hey, it's like start where you are and kind of gradually condition, cultivate, and then, so the way to go towards unity consciousness is to first become aware of being and know all your shit and all of the mechanical stuff, because all of the mechanical unconscious stuff are sucking energy. So yeah, I appreciate about the fourth way. They say awakening. It's almost like a chemical process. It's a transmutation process. It's not just understanding something or getting something, or it's like this is a whole other topic, Peter. This is like seeing the human body as a factory. And in the second state, in state of sleep, the factory is unproductive, bankrupt, dangerous factory. And the third state, this factory starts to work better, and the energy is not blown out. The reactors are not blowing out. The raw material goes into more presence, more presence, more presence, and then the factory starts to work better. There's more order and harmony in the realm. And then if one keeps going, the energy, instead of being leaked, lost, wasted, it keeps transmuting to activate the deeper awareness. So we wanted to start with these 4 states of consciousness because we can build now on future talks. The fourth way is not just this like lofty technical intellectual things that you just heard us for the last probably 2 hours or more. They are very many practical, they are practical ways to make this happen, as you're driving, as you're having a shower, in everyday life. So however, it's a mistake to jump into practices. I mean, it's not a mistake, but it's more limited to jump into practices right away without awareness of who or what and why and what's happening. So as Uspensky would say, the more you understand why you make an effort, the more you'll make benefit, more profit out of that effort, All right, so I feel we covered a lot of territory. It's a lot of knowledge that we are going to build on future talks, as well as in terms of practical application. In the next talk, we are going to tackle some important psychological aspect of the fourth way. As I mentioned, there's a cosmology, the study of the universe, and there's a psychological aspect, the study of the inner universe, so to say. So we are going to, from next time, bring some practical, experiential tools, methods. They are all in the fourth way, all about changing the state of affairs. It's interesting, state of affairs. So all the practices and all the knowledge and everything is geared towards us becoming more conscious in the second state and getting more frequently to the upper edges of the second state and having more glimpses in the third state and more frequency of the third state self-consciousness. So it's all about that, basically, how to make this happen. And we are going to continue with this theoretical outline of it. And next time we are going to continue also to riff and how does it link to trauma, how does it link to other pathways that are correlated. This being said, just watching some videos with us or even reading Gurdjieff, that is not enough at all. So this is meant to offer as the tools, the map for us to help each other, remind each other, work with each other, So Peter and myself, we are planning to actually start a group module as the container to a laboratory to apply this work and share with each other and grow together. So we are planning to do this in person as well as online. And we are not sure when we are going to start this, maybe around 3-5 weeks from now. And now it's, I think, middle of October 2023. Yeah, so stay tuned. Feel free to send us any questions to my email address or in comments here, and we'll keep you tuned. Keep
And
you
Mihai,
Yeah.
I would just like to add for those who are listening that what we're going to try to present, and this is true of all of the ideas in the system, all of the ideas have either one of two purposes or they have both purposes. One of those purposes is to help a person confirm, see for themselves what it means that they are asleep. The other meaning, the other purpose they have is to actually enable, facilitate, support, encourage consciousness to realize itself. And really, every idea in the system falls into one or both of those categories, and that will be our intent. And to try to, we will by necessity be speaking theoretically in many instances, but our intent is to make all of that, or to help others make that as practical for themselves, as real for themselves in their daily life, in your daily life, amidst your situations.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Also, they are already on my YouTube channel where you see this Circle of Being Somatic Shadow Work. I already have several videos. Actually, I have a lot, actually, hundreds of videos. They are actually very practical, offering certain guidance, certain pointers to shift the level of consciousness. And in the last few months, as I got more into the study of the fourth way, so I have bunch of videos there. So if you just look at my YouTube channel and look at, anything to do that says self-remembering, awarenessing, self-remembering, there are already practical exercises and pointers and teachings available already as it is now. But as we are going to do this together in a context of a group for a few months, then we are going to be much more direct about it and set up some weekly group aims and certain practices, and we are going to report on what happened, and in this way we grow together. Good, Peter?
Thank you, Mihai. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Very nice. Very nice to, as I mentioned to you offline a minute ago, to be just talking with you about all this and trying to review it, present it afresh, anew, in a way that we hope will be of interest, and even more than that, have real meaning for someone tuning in. Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.